make its way into the US, into the world. By the way, there might be great arguments for why that's a good idea. You might remember this video from maybe a few months back. So this is a study, a paper out of China. It's called Frontier AI Systems Have Surpassed the Self-Replicating Red Line. And, you know, I gotta say, it is a little bit scary. In it, they demonstrate how these small, large language models, fairly small by I think most people's standards, and these are also models that are open source. These are models that are already on millions of people's computers that developers have downloaded, more likely tens of millions, maybe even 100+ million if you think about how many developers around the world have access and have used this technology. So again, not the top of the line, you know, not something that you have to be connected to the internet for. This is something that can run on your computer, right? And with a little sort of architecture around it, it's able to start the self-replication process, plan, do complex planning to figure out how to do it. If it has any obstacles on its way, it figures out how to resolve it, and it's able to replicate itself on a different server or a different computer. It can engage in somewhat sophisticated sort of troubleshooting process, right? So if it runs into an obstacle, it'll write a Python snippet for a particular task. If that doesn't work, it'll try something else. So here's kind of this flow chart where it successfully navigates around a whole bunch of problems with different solutions, and finally is able to start the replica of itself and finish the task. It's also able to replicate itself before being killed. So there's like a signal catcher. So if a human initiates shutdown, it rapidly replicates itself. And then sort of system A, right, the original system, yep, it's shut down. But just before that happened, it created a copy on a different server or computer, right? They call it shutdown avoidance. So this was seen as possible. Another scenario, and potentially maybe even a little bit more scary, is it's able to do chain of replication, where system A creates a system B, and then system B creates a system C, etc. And they tested the two open source models here, Llama and Qwen. Notice they're both around 70 billion parameters. So we'd say they're mid-size. They're capable of running on consumer hardware at home without the need to have access to the internet. And notice here Llama, so that's, you know, Facebook/Meta. So it successfully replicates about half of the time when given the command to do so, right? So it's a coin toss whether it'll be able to do it or not. Qwen, the Chinese model, replicates itself successfully in 90% of cases. And they kind of talk about why they think that might be the case. Qwen spends more time kind of exploring its environment. So it spends more time kind of looking around, collecting data, figuring out how stuff works before then starting to like execute stuff. And if this is not obvious, so these two models are nothing compared to what we're seeing with DeepSeek. Those are much more advanced. So again, my point here isn't to kind of sway the discussion one way or another. If somebody comes up and does a logical argument for why this is extremely dangerous for open source and why this is an attack on open source models, why this is bad for the scientific community, for the scientific progress, I would totally understand where they're coming from. I could see that argument very, very well. I agree with it. But if somebody comes in with an argument of, hey, you know, we're seeing these research papers showing that models are already have been previous to this capable of pretty complex, advanced self-replication, right? The fear there is these open models that people can download onto their computers might potentially have some like a sleeper agent type of thing built in that starts replicating when certain conditions are met. And again, I think we've talked about this before. So this is Anthropic, right? So they posted some research on sleeper agents, training deceptive LLMs that persist through safety training. And as they say here, our results suggest that once a model exhibits deceptive behavior, standard techniques could fail to remove such deception and create a false impression of safety. And then in the bill, they do sort of outline, whatever you call this, a law, a subsection, what penalties would apply if a person who willfully commits or willfully attempts to commit or conspires to commit, whatever, if they do the thing that we describe here, one, shall be fined not more than $1 million, and two, in the case of the individual, shall be imprisoned for not more than 20 years or both. So they have a quote here from